Soils. What is soil? Soil is a combination of weathered rock material, organic matter, water, and air. And the organic matter comes from materials such as dead leaves or branches, even dead animals. Soils are considered to be an interface because they form where the geosphere, atmosphere, hydrosphere, and biosphere meet. Some other vocabulary terms related to soils include regolith. Regolith is a layer of rock and mineral fragments produced by weathering that covers most of the Earth's land surfaces. Soil is the portion of the regolith that supports plant life. Humus is carbon derived by bacterial decay of organic matter. So it's related to organic matter, but it's decayed organic matter. And then we have pore spaces. Pore spaces are spaces in between soil particles that can be filled with either air or water. Why is it important to study soils? Soil is important to life because it supports vegetation or plant growth. Plants derive most of their nutrients and water from soil that they live in. Plants support the rest of the food chain by assimilating nutrients from the soil. Many of these nutrients come from the weathering of rocks at the crust, or that are part of the Earth's crust. And then the plants make those elements and nutrients available for animals to consume. So instead of animals eating soil, you're eating plants that already took up those minerals, incorporated those minerals and nutrients into the plant tissues, and then animals are able to eat the plants and then get those nutrients from the plants. So what is soil made of? The same four components make up all soils in varying ratios. When you examine a soil that is in a good condition for supporting plant life, generally that type of soil will contain the following. Almost half of it will be made of weathered rock material, which we call mineral matter. About 25% will be water in the pore spaces. About 25% will be air in the pore spaces. And about 5% will be humus, which again is decayed remains of plants and animal life, or decayed organic matter. I just want to make that more clear here, decayed organic matter. So those components in those percentages make up a good soil for farming, good soil for plant life. Now, many soils do not have the same ratios. They may have more or less organic material, for example. Now, when it comes to soil formation, there are different factors that are involved that will affect the type of soil we get and the thickness of the soil, the fertility of the soil. Different properties of the soil are all related to these 5 factors: the parent material, the climate, plants and animals, time, and topography. So I will go down that list and we're going to go in more detail about each of those factors. So the parent material, that is the source of the weathered material that comes from minerals from which soils develop. So in other words, it's the source of the rocks, the source of the minerals that break down, contributing mineral material to the soils. The parent material could either be unconsolidated sediment deposits that are at or near the Earth's surface. When I say near the surface, I mean just under the surface. Or the parent material could be bedrock, hard, solid bedrock. When the parent material is local bedrock, the resulting soil is called residual soil. When the parent material is unconsolidated sediment deposits, such as floodplain deposits or glacial till, the resulting soil is called transported soil. This diagram shows you all the way on the right, a residual soil developed on bedrock. And then in the middle, it shows you transported soil that is developed on floodplains, which are stream deposit sediments. So these are unconsolidated sediments that have weathered down into soil. And on this side is the bedrock that has weathered down into the soil. Parent material influences soil in two ways. The parent material influences the rate of weathering and thus the rate of the soil formation. Unconsolidated materials will turn to soil faster because they are already partly weathered. They're already broken down into smaller pieces. But then like bedrock is going to take longer to weather because it's a full solid piece of rock. Okay, so it takes longer to weather down. Some rock types weather more quickly than others. So that's another way that the parent material influences the rate of weathering. For example, limestone weathers faster than granite. Then I'm just going to add here then bedrock to make it a little bit clearer. And the second way that parent material influences soil is that the mineral or chemical composition of the parent material affects the fertility of the soil. And the fertility affects the vegetation that could grow on the land. So depending on what chemical composition you have of your parent rocks, that is going to end up going into the soil. So that affects the fertility, the nutrients that are available for the plants. The second factor related to soil formation is climate. Climate is the most important factor in soil formation, and climate varies by latitude generally. It also varies by altitude or elevation. Climate is referring to temperature and precipitation patterns. So chemical weathering of rocks and minerals occurs more quickly in climates that are warm and wet, for example, tropical. Thus, you have increased soil formation in tropical regions. So tropical areas are going to have thick soils. So wet, warm climates are dominated by chemical weathering of rocks and minerals. Cold, dry climates are dominated by physical weathering processes. Leaching is also related to climate. Leaching is a process that involves water removing minerals and other materials from soil, which affects fertility of soil. Because the removal of minerals means you have fewer nutrients available for the plants. Leaching increases with increased rainfall. Thus, fertility of soils in climates with high rainfall can be affected. So this is just a cartoon of leaching. So you have all this rain, it hits the ground, the rainwater infiltrates the soil, which means it sinks down, travels downward into the soil. It picks up minerals and carries them downward. This is a picture or two pictures of laterite soil. Laterite soil is found in tropical climates. It is related to high amounts of weathering and leaching. The red color is due to iron oxide, which is a result of chemical weathering of iron that is present in the soil. The third factor is plants and animals. The decay of dead plants is the main source of organic matter to soil. Animals contribute to a lesser extent. Mostly we are referring to dead plants, plant material. And I will just add and humus here to make that more clear. So organic matter is going to come from the dead plants, and then the decay of the organic matter gives you humus. Plant and animal remains provide the organic matter to the soil. Soils related to bogs and swamps will have higher amounts of organic matter. Those types of soils are going to be composed mostly of organic matter. In contrast, desert soils may be composed of less than 1% organic matter. And that's mainly because there is less vegetation to decompose. Decomposed organic matter, or humus, in soil supplies important nutrients to plants, animals, and microorganisms that live in the soil. Microorganisms such as fungus or bacteria feed on the organic matter, break it down, and form humus. Fertility of soil is related to the amount of decomposed organic matter present. Organic matter also helps with soil water retention, allowing the soil to remain moist. There are some microorganisms that help with nitrogen fixation. That means that they are able to convert atmospheric nitrogen into a form of nitrogen that can be used as a nutrient by plants, which we call soil nitrogen. Also related to animals is earthworms and other burrowing animals. They help mix the soil as well as help water and air to pass through the soil, mainly through channels that they form through burrows. So an earthworm is going to burrow through the soil, producing channels in the soil. So that helps aerate the soil and mix it up. The next factor related to soil formation is time. If soil formation has not been occurring in an area for a long period of time, the soil will be similar in character to the parent material. Generally, the longer the soil has been forming, the thicker it becomes and the less it resembles the parent material. It can take 80 to 400 years for soil forming processes to create 1 centimeter of topsoil. And 1 centimeter is less than an inch. So it takes a very long time for topsoil to form. Then we have topography. Variations in topography can lead to the development of a variety of different local soils. The variability is mainly related to the steepness of slopes in an area. So on steep slopes, soil is poorly developed due to rapid runoff, lower soil moisture, and fewer plants inhabiting the land. Also, erosion increases on slopes. Therefore, soils are thin or non-existent on steep slopes. So this was the left part of the diagram I showed you earlier, where you have the steep slope over here, and there's no soil development. Okay, and then it kind of, there's an arrow that shows you like a photo of this steep area. So there's not going to be really any soil developing on that. In contrast to steep slopes, areas at the base of a slope tend to be poorly drained with stagnant water or waterlogged soils. So this is a photo of some waterlogged soil where the water is just stagnant, sitting there, basically just flooding the soil. So now we're going to talk about describing and classifying soils. So we have something called a soil profile. The soil profile shows a cross-section of the soil layers. So if you were to dig into the ground, you would see the soil profile. And the layers are called horizons. Horizons differ in texture, structure, composition, and color. Soil layers from the top to the bottom are called horizons O, A, E, B, and C. So you have this diagram in the textbook, and then they describe each of them. So the O horizon is loose and partly decayed organic matter. The A horizon is mineral matter mixed with some humus. The E horizon is the zone of alluviation and leaching. The B horizon is the accumulation of clay transported from above. And the C horizon is partially altered parent material. And then all the way on the bottom is your unweathered parent material. And then there is a tutorial about soil profiles that I am going to share right now.
After watching this video, you should be able to describe the sequence for the different horizons that are found in the typical soil profile, and you should explain why those different horizons are where we find them. So soil is really important. It's the substrate in which we grow the food that we eat, or we grow crops that we feed the livestock that we then eat. Soil is essential for feeding the human population, so it's important to know something about it. Soil is about half solid material and half empty space. The solid material basically is divided up between a majority of mineral matter, so these are rock fragments and mineral grains, chemical residues, things like that, and then a smaller proportion that is organic material or humus. The rest of the soil is empty space, and that empty space can be occupied by air or water, depending on the climatic conditions of the time. This is a look at a typical soil profile. Soil profiles vary from place to place, but typically you'll see these general horizons. We start off at the top with the O horizon. The O horizon is basically dominated by organic materials, plant fragments and things like that. Below the O horizon is the A horizon, and this is where we find mineral matter that's been mixed in with some humus. Below the A horizon is the E horizon. And the E horizon basically forms when rainwater percolates down through the soil and it leaches out material from the mineral matter in the A horizon and the E horizon. Basically, it's dissolving away material and then carrying it down through the soil profile as it percolates in. Some of that material ends up accumulating at the B horizon. So the B horizon basically is a spot where there's accumulation of clay that's been transported in from above. So some of the clay that you find in the B horizon didn't start off there. It was transported in from, say, the E horizon or the A. Now, the O horizon and the A horizon together are called the topsoil, and they're so rich in organic material so that they appear quite brown, usually a very dark color. The B horizon is often known as the subsoil. And together, all the layers that have been discussed so far, O, A, E, and B, are referred to as the solum, or the true soil. Below the true soil is the C horizon. This is partially altered parent material, so basically rotten bedrock. And then below that is the bedrock itself, unweathered parent material. Here are two examples of soil profiles, one from South Dakota on the left and one from Puerto Rico on the right. So you can see that there are certain horizons that will stand out to the eye. So here, for instance, you can see that O horizon up at the top. You've got the A horizon that's still dark. So together, those two are the topsoil. Here's the E horizon that's been eluviated, so it's had material leached out from it, and then the B horizon below that. The example in Puerto Rico is more gradual, where you see basically a change in color from top to bottom, but definitely you can still see the organic material is at the top. How about this example here? Is this something that you're ever going to be likely to see out in the real world? And if so, how would it form? Hopefully what you said is that this is an unlikely situation to be stable in a soil anywhere in the world, but you could actually get something like this where you had an earlier well-developed soil profile and then maybe a flood or something deposited a bunch of mineral matter on top of it, and then new organic material accumulated up top. So you could end up getting a preserved topsoil layer in a soil profile, but it's not going to last very long. You know, once the processes of alluviation and leaching go to work on this, you're going to end up rapidly reorganizing this stuff into something that looks more typical. Thanks very much for your attention. This has been another Smart Figure.
And if you want to watch that again, you do have the link on the bottom here. Right there. Okay, and note, not all soils have all of the following soil horizons. These were also just discussed in that little video. So the summary is that horizon O is the organic matter. It could be a few centimeters thick, so it's not an extremely thick layer. The upper part of horizon O is plant material like leaf litter, branches, etc. The lower O horizon is the humus, or the decayed organic material. There's lots of microorganisms within the horizon O as well, like bacteria, fungus, algae, and insects. Horizon A is mostly mineral matter as well as some humus. Together, the O and the A horizons make up the topsoil. Horizon E is light colored and has little organic matter. And we call it the zone of leaching and the zone of alluviation. Alluviation means the washing away of finer particles. So water that infiltrates and percolates downward through the soil carries finer particles away. And leaching is depletion of soluble materials from the upper soil, where water that infiltrates and percolates downward through the soil dissolves minerals and carries them downward into lower layers. So then horizon B is the zone of accumulation. That's where the finer particles removed by alluviation from horizon E accumulate in horizon B, and they can form irregular masses or clumps of minerals or layers of compacted clay. Horizon C is your partially weathered parent material that transitions downward to the unaltered, unweathered parent material, such as bedrock beneath the soil. And again, this is a soil profile. You saw this in the video. The white clumps in here are called caliche. That's white calcium carbonate deposits that accumulated in horizon B. So how do we classify soil? That's called soil taxonomy. Soil taxonomy is a system used by soil scientists in the US to classify soils based on physical and chemical properties of the soil profiles. The taxonomy is organized based on soil characteristics that are observable. Table 6.2 on the next slide shows brief descriptions of the 12 basic soil orders. This is also a table shown in page 175 in the textbook, the 13th edition. So this shows you the soil orders, the basic ones: alpha soil, andisol, aridosol, antisol, gelisol, histosol, inceptisol, mollisol, oxisol, spotisol, utisol, vertisol. And then they have descriptions in here. And then the percentage stands for the percentages of the world's ice-free surface. So alpha sol makes up almost 10% of the soil on the Earth's surface where there are no glaciers. So ice-free just means no glaciers. So this is a picture that shows you, or a map that shows you the soil taxonomy of the United States. And this is the USDA, that's the United States Department of Agriculture. So you could look more closely and see the type of soils that we have here, okay? And if we're going by Queens, Queens is part of Long Island. And if you look at the color there, it's blue. And then we look blue, whoops, blue is entisols, right? So blue, blue, entisols, and then we could go to the table on the previous slide and see what entisol is. Young soils having limited development and exhibiting properties of the parent material. Productivity ranges from very high for those formed on recent river deposits to very low for those formed on shifting sand or rocky slopes. Productivity is talking about fertility of the soil in terms of plant growth. So you may be wondering why Long Island has this type of soil. What might that be related to? That is most likely related to the glacial deposits, the glacial till, the outwash plains that formed Long Island. And this is the world distribution of those 12 soil orders. So you can look and see other locations that have the entisols, other locations around the world that have all of these soil orders. And then you have glacial ice, Antarctica and Greenland. And these are some photos that show you what those soils may look like. There we go. Now you can see it. And then this is the rest of them. So you see some of them are dark, some of them are reddish orange. Some of them are a little bit more white. Okay, so I'm going to stop the recording.